We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotticook, Golden Hill Pagusset, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. K'chi Willie Winnie, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Holocaust survivor Rabbi Lazowski. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Holocaust survivor Rabbi Lazowski.
Everybody please rise. Almighty God, with joyous spirits, we have gathered this afternoon to dedicate the Dodd Center for Human Rights on the 75th anniversary of the verdict of the Nuremberg trials. And now that the long-awaited day has come, we come forth with our gratitude and with humble spirits and thankful hearts. As a Holocaust survivor, I represent my fellow survivors and all the people who lost by the brutality of Nazism. I could never imagine in my life that this day, here with the President of the United States of America, when I was a little boy fleeing the Nazis. To me, as a Holocaust survivor, this building is a holy place because it houses the papers of Thomas J. Dodd, Executive Counsel of the United States, prosecution team at the Nuremberg trials. These procedures were the first international condemnation of genocide and crimes against humanity and document the losses that we as a people suffered during World War II. Let us praise and honor Senator Chris Dodd and his father, Senator Thomas Dodd, of blessed memory, for the legacy of seeking truth and justice under the rule of the law, so that the atrocities that we have witnessed and lived through will never be acceptable in any corner of the world. In the words of King Solomon, may this edifice always illuminate our steps. Let the clarion call for justice and truth fortify our resolve to strive for the eradication of darkness, ignorance, and superstition in our society. We praise and honor our President, Joe Biden, as the leader of the free world. We pray that his lofty vision causes all children to live in creative freedom and cooperative enterprise, with none to make them afraid. Help us to draw upon his noble impulses in his heart. May we be worthy of the American's dream, combining George Washington's devotion to truth, Abraham Lincoln's faith in freedom and equality, and Chris Dodd and Thomas Dodd's dedication to justice and human rights. We pray that this edifice will become a treasure, a house of knowledge and understanding, of guidance and inspiration for all who enter in search of truth. Bless our going out and our coming in, for now and forevermore, and let us all say, Amen. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the singing of our national anthem by Nadia, Aguilar, Steinberg.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we've watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chairman Dan Toscano.
Good afternoon, everyone. There's a saying at UConn, never speak after Gino. I'm going to modify that to never speak after Rabbi Lazowski. Those words were incredible, and pardon me for being a little choked up. But good afternoon to everyone. It's so wonderful to have so many of our close friends and family, students, alums, and friends of UConn here today. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, a warm welcome to everyone. I'd just like to take a second to acknowledge my fellow trustees. For those of you who are here, maybe just stand up for a second and please be recognized. These folks do work that you never see, and they're all volunteers. And I thank you for your service, and I'm humbled to be a member of the board alongside you. I'd like to welcome everyone to UConn and our beautiful campus, one of 5 that we operate across the state. And above all, it is an extraordinary privilege to be able to welcome the President of the United States to Connecticut and to the University of Connecticut for the dedication of the newly named Dodd Center for Human Rights. I note with enormous pride that President Biden did not earn his undergraduate degree from an Ivy League school or another private college, but from the University of Delaware, a flagship public land-grant university just like ours. A decade ago in a speech at UD, then Vice President Biden referred to the campus as the place that, quote, played such a role in shaping my life. He also said it was professors like Dr. Dolan, Dr. Bennett, Dr. Belinsky, and maybe the smartest guy who ever taught me, Dr. David Ingersoll, who helped me understand the transformative events that occurred during my time here. And of course, he went on to devote his life to the cause of public service, which would eventually bring him to our spectacular campus as the 46th President of the United States. That is an amazing testament to the vital role public higher education plays, not only in the life of individuals, but in the life of our nation. Life-transformative education is UConn's mission, and we are thrilled to share that passion with our president. I'd also like to thank Senator Chris Dodd, who was instrumental in bringing this day about. He has been a dedicated and steadfast friend of UConn for decades and has played a key role in supporting UConn's premier, nationally known human rights program, which is based right here at the Dodd Center. We are incredibly grateful to him, his family, and we are proud to honor the legacies of both Christopher Dodd and his father, Senator Thomas J. Dodd. We're dedicating the facility behind me today, but this occasion is not about a building or a renaming. It is about something bigger than that. It's about a mission. The mission of the Dodd Center is to promote, nurture, and champion the cause of human rights here and around the world. The Dodd Center, like UConn as a whole, has an ambitious goal: to cultivate and harness the boundless intellectual strength and determination of our students, faculty, and staff in order to help bring about a better world for ourselves and a better future for all of humankind. An undertaking that we all support with our time and our resources and our pride. These are perilous times for human rights, for freedom, and for democracy. One of the great challenges of our time is to preserve and advance all 3. And like all American institutions devoted to that goal, in its 25 years, the work of the Dodd Center has never been more vital or more urgent. The righteous drive and exceptional talent in our students, faculty, and staff, along with many others across the nation, tells me that we are more than equal to this task. UConn and its people are known to be humble, hewing to the culture of the land of steady habits. But I'm going to take a moment and brag about the Dodd Center and the Human Rights Institute. These organizations support interdisciplinary inquiry into the most pressing human rights questions, and they prepare the next generation of human rights advocates across a range of fields. the Institute offers an undergraduate major and minor, the largest at any public university in the United States, the largest, and a graduate certificate and Master of Arts program supported by over 40 faculty from across our academic enterprise. UConn is best in class in the country and perhaps in the world. Please, let's celebrate the success of these world-renowned programs. Thank you again for joining us here today, and I just have to say it, go Huskies.
Please welcome University President Andrew Aguinobi.
Thank you everyone for being here. So I have the extreme honor on behalf of our entire University of Connecticut to welcome the President of the United States of America, President Joe Biden, to our wonderful university. We, the students, faculty, employees, and the Board of Trustees want to express our deepest thanks to President Biden, not only for his time here and for his presence today, but also for his support for human rights and justice here and throughout the world. It's a rare honor for a university to welcome the President of the United States to its campus. For us, it's the first time that we have had a sitting president visit UConn since 1995. That presidential visit was also a visit to the Dodd Center. So this is yet another historic milestone in an exemplary trajectory of scholarship, teaching, and advocacy for the Dodd Center for Human Rights and the Human Rights Institute. I want to thank Senator Chris Dodd, his late father, Senator Thomas J. Dodd, and their whole family for championing human rights and for making it possible for our faculty and students to develop one of the best human rights programs in the country. It is to celebrate father and son senators in Chris and Thomas Dodd and to celebrate the vital work of the Dodd Center for Human Rights that we are here at this dedication and renaming ceremony today. I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to also thank Gary Gladstein and his family, whose vision and transformational commitment to the University of Connecticut established the Human Rights Institute, a world-renowned community of academics and activists united in the pursuit of human rights. I must also take a moment to thank the federal and state officials who are with us today, including the governor, lieutenant governor, our congressional delegation, the constitutional officers, and a number of state legislators. I would like to thank all of you here for joining us and supporting the Dodd Center for Human Rights. Now, we can never forget that a university like UConn is all about our students. So I want to congratulate our students on their passion for activism and human rights. Talking about students, I'd also like to thank the School of Fine Arts student jazz quintet players up there who have been playing jazz for us. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank the generous donors, many of whom are here, who support the diverse programs housed by the Dodd Center. There are too many to mention, but I would like to give a special thanks to Bank of America, Stanley Black & Decker, Travelers, Shari Redstone, and the Lamont Foundation. When the Dodd Center was founded in 1995, it was with the ambition to place UConn at the forefront of human rights, scholarship, and activism, both here in the United States and around the world. Today, we are proud to say that ambition has been rewarded by research, teaching, and outreach that have made the Dodd Center synonymous with the cause of human rights. By helping to ensure that human rights are protected, that human dignity is supported, and that our common humanity is recognized, we fulfill the highest aspirations of a world-class university. For 25 years, the Dodd Center has been essential in helping UConn to meet those ambitious ideals. and I look forward to what the next 25 years have in store. Now, of course, all of you know that it takes a village and it requires leadership. In Connecticut, we have been very fortunate to have leaders who understand the mission of the university and the Dodd Center and who have provided support and commitment along the way. We are honored to have one of those leaders here with us today. He has proven himself a compassionate and determined public servant, a true friend to the University of Connecticut, and, as his presence here today indicates, a supporter of the universal cause of human rights. Please join me in welcoming Governor Ned Lamont.
Well, thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to say to the students of UConn, before we had FaceTime, before we had Zoom, we used to write a lot of letters. And Chris Dodd wrote a book called Letters from Nuremberg. It was about letters that his dad wrote when he was at Nuremberg at the age of 38, across the Atlantic from his family. And it were letters from the heart, letters where he asked how his wife Grace was doing, how the kids were doing, what they were making for dinner. And Grace, I'm thinking about you whenever I hear When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. That's what I'm listening to right now. His letters also talked about what the meaning of Nuremberg was. This was at the end of World War II. And the question was, how do you deal with these Nazi leaders? Some thought maybe you should have a trial. Stalin said, what's a trial? Even Winston Churchill said maybe they should just be executed. But the President of the United States and Judge Jackson and Thomas Dodd thought otherwise. They said, America is super because of the power of our ideals. That's what makes us super. And we're going to stay true to our ideals, true to a rule of law, true to the fact that these people are going to be tried in a courtroom setting, and the evidence is going to be laid out in front of the people around the world, and they will get their just desserts. And that's just what happened. And young attorney, 38-year-old Thomas Dodd led the way in that prosecution. And that was, to some degree, the world's introduction to America as a superpower and what we stood for. More than our military might, it was the power of our ideals, the power of the rule of law, the power of human rights. That's what that represented, and that's what that statement was, and that's what that book was about, and that's what Thomas Dodd was about. And then he came home, and he got home, and he saw his young son, Chris, for the first time, just learning to walk, barely able to walk. And as they say, they started calling Chris Dodd the Shadow, because he followed his dad everywhere he went. And fast forward 30 years, Chris followed his dad into Congress, and followed his dad into the US Senate, and followed his dad in terms of representing the very best ideals of this country, especially when it came to kids and family and medical leave and child care and everything that he thought was important to the American ideal going forward. And that's why this center is named after Thomas and Chris Dodd. Chris was telling me, though, that just a few months ago, he got a letter. And he got a letter from a professor from Alabama State. And the professor said, back in 1960, we had a protest, African-American kids protesting on college, protesting segregation. And the silence was deafening. But then they started getting some messages from University of Connecticut, messages from students at the University of Connecticut, some cash included with those messages from the students at the University of Connecticut. And the professor asked, and who was Jeremy Dodd? Because Jeremy Dodd is the person that made this happen. I don't know, there's something in the water in that Dodd family, and I hope you guys are all drinking it. And I'd like to think that the Dodd Center is all about those family dinners, back and forth, talking about what makes America special, what makes America great, being true to our values, true to ourselves, true to human rights. And if UConn and the Dodd Center can help establish that and make sure the next generation follows on what Tom and Chris Dodd did, we'll be a better country for it. Thanks, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Representative Joe Courtney.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Aguinobi and the Board of Trustees and all of the UConn team for the invitation to be part of this special day for UConn, for Senator Chris Dodd, for Jackie, for Christina, and other family members that are joining us here today. It's also an honor to be here with my colleagues who are sitting in the front row and President Biden, Governor Lamont. For President Biden, he's now racked up his second trip to Eastern Connecticut in the first 268 days of his administration to visit two of our nation's crown jewels of higher education, the United States Coast Guard Academy and today the University of Connecticut. For those of us who live in this region, we know there is no better place than UConn for Chris Dodd's work on human rights to be perpetuated. As many here know, Senator Dodd was born right up the road in Willimantic, or as we call it, romantic Willimantic, and spent much of his childhood in nearby Norwich, and began his journey in public service as the congressman from Eastern Connecticut. As he and I have discussed many times, this is a quintessential swing seat where he honed his skills as a results-oriented legislator, because that's exactly what his constituents expected and which he faithfully delivered over and over again. His footprint in this part of the state, and I can attest to it personally, is wide and deep, and today is another example of where that footprint gets deeper and wider for the people of the state of Connecticut. However, as all of us know today, Congressman Dodd and Senator Dodd was not merely Senator Pothole. Fueled by his time in the Peace Corps and his father's example, he worked tirelessly to create an enlightened foreign policy centered around human rights. As tempting as it is to list all of his work on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, today is not a walk down memory lane. It's about the UConn Center continuing Chris's work with an outstanding faculty and an inspired student body, which our country sorely needs. When President Biden spoke to the graduating cadets in New London last May, he eloquently framed their work as part of the 21st century struggle between autocracy and democracy, a perspective that has been the North Star of the Biden administration since Inauguration Day. To those cadets who are now ensigns and who are out on patrol as part of the effort to protect the rule of law on the high seas in the Indo-Pacific, which is under constant attack by the new autocrats. So too are human rights under attack, whether it's in the Xinjiang province or whether it's in a Moscow jail where Viktor Navalny is being held as a political prisoner. The students who pass through this institute will be the new guardians and new protectors of these fundamental values of human rights which separate this country from the autocrats. Today's event in the presence of President Biden, as in New London, powerfully footstomps the importance of that work. Congratulations again to all at the university for making this day possible. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Senator Christopher Murphy.
Well, good afternoon to the UConn community. I'm so grateful to be here today with the Connecticut congressional delegation, Senator Dodd and his family, and of course with President Biden. It was really heartwarming to hear the story that the governor told about Senator Dodd following from the earliest days in the literal footsteps and later in the figurative footsteps of his father. But I'm here to tell you the story of literally thousands, if not tens of thousands, of people here in Connecticut who are in public life today, who are serving their communities because they're following in the footsteps of Senator Chris Dodd. I was thinking of what I was doing in the summer and fall of 1995, the last time that a United States president came here to the UConn campus. I was fulfilling my childhood dream. I was interning for Chris Dodd. I was doing that because he set an example for so many of us. A senator who was willing to speak truth to power. A senator who understood the role that America could play around the world for good, for peace. A senator who was willing to take chances, to travel to dangerous places like Central America in order to show the example that America could set to end civil conflict, to bring warring factions together. Senator Dodd may have been following in the footsteps of his father, but there are so many all around this state and all around this nation who are engaged in some way in this fight for human rights, in this fight for democracy because of Chris Dodd. And I come back to the letters that we celebrate and the records that this center is going to be able to share with the world. And I was reading through a few of them just getting ready for today, and I came along a passage from one of Tom Dodd's letters that he wrote just a day after actually arriving in Nuremberg. He was describing what he saw, the dead city of Nuremberg in the wake of the destruction of World War II. He said the refugees, the deportees, all winding a weary way through the wreckage, one-legged soldiers, soldiers with women bedraggled and worn-looking, families pulling little carts or pushing baby carriages loaded with a few miserable possessions. I ask, where do they come from? Where are they going? How do they eat? Where do they sleep? No one knows. It's been an endless procession every day. God spare our people from any such fate. The work of upholding human rights, the work of making sure that we walk the walk on civil liberties and human rights and democracy promotion, as well as promote it overseas. It is about avoiding conflict. It is about giving people access to the apparatus of registering grievances with their government so that they don't have to resort to violence. And the legacy of Tom Dodd, the legacy of Chris Dodd, derived from the lessons learned from World War II and from the Nuremberg trials, is to make sure that more people around this world have access to the ability to engage in civil disobedience, in conversation with their government, to make sure that that fate that Tom Dodd saw in Nuremberg and in Germany never visits here and visits fewer and fewer people across the world as time goes by. I want to thank the Dodd family. I want to thank the UConn community for setting up a bold foundation with a bold mission to try to teach those lessons learned by Senator Tom Dodd and his son. Thank you very much for making this day possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Thank you so much. I am so deeply excited and honored to celebrate this day with you. And first of all, thank you to all of the board, the teachers, the faculty, the staff of UConn for making UConn one of the very best universities in the entire country. Thank you to all of you who contribute so much every day. And thank you to President Biden for helping us to celebrate this day. I was with President Biden earlier, as many of us were, at a child care center. And he said that he likes children better than people. being in Washington, I understand why he might say that. But there is no mistaking how deeply President Biden is committed to this cause. And there is no exaggerating the importance of this day. Literally, the Dodd Center will advance the cause of human rights in teaching and research, and yes, in activism around the world. It will put UConn on the map as the premier institution for human rights and liberties around this nation. And we all ought to be grateful to the Dodd family for giving us this great gift. You know, when senators leave the United States Senate, they traditionally inscribe their names in the desk that they use. When I came to the Senate, I took Chris Dodd's seat. There was no way I could fill his shoes, but I took his desk. And Chris Dodd's name is inscribed in that desk, and so is his dad's. Every day I come to work, and I look at those signatures, and I read the note that Chris Dodd left me on the day he left. It inspires me every day, whether it is in the course of debating the National Defense Act, or impeachment, or the rule of law in this country, that the ideals and values that Chris Dodd fought for every day at that desk should continue to lead all of us. And that we have a role, not only in this country, each of us, but also around the world, to make sure that every person is counted as someone who deserves freedom and human rights. Every single person is of value. Every single person deserves those values and ideals. And I want to thank Joe Biden and his administration for knowing and acting on those principles and values and ideals. It's the reason why he is committed to get out of Afghanistan. All of the partners and allies who sided with us, and they deserve to leave Afghanistan and have the freedom and opportunity and human rights that they fought at our side to achieve. It's the reason why he has said, and he believes, that women's rights are human rights around the world. And Chris Dodd has stood strong and fought hard for these values and ideals, and this place of learning and activism will motivate and inspire countless people to go around the world and around our own country and fight for those rights and liberties. It will be a place not only of great learning, but also of great activism. And I thank Chris Dodd and President Biden for making this day so historic. Thank you all.
Mankind will know that no crime will go unpunished because it was committed in the name of a political party or of a state. That no crime will be passed by because it is too big. That no criminals will avoid punishment because they are too many.
If, as so many of us believe, this country rests, in the end, upon its devotion to freedom and liberty and democracy, and upon the strength of its families, you could hardly find a better example than the Dodd family, not only for their devotion to liberty and democracy, but also for their devotion to family and to the memory of Senator Tom Dodd.
In October 1995, UConn dedicated the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center to honor the Connecticut senator's career in public service and to preserve his legacy as executive trial counsel at the historic Nuremberg trials, which began exactly 50 years before the Dodd Center opened its doors. As a state-of-the-art archival facility, the Dodd Center houses Thomas Dodd's papers, which document the prosecution of Nazi leadership for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The dedication of the Dodd Center kicked off the Dodd Human Rights Year, featuring conferences, workshops, and lectures on human rights issues past and present, local and global. From these beginnings, the Dodd Center would grow into one of the most dynamic centers of human rights scholarship, teaching, and engagement anywhere in the world. In 1996, alumnus Gary Gladstein endowed the Marcia Lillian Gladstein Visiting Professorship in Human Rights. And that same year, the Dodd Center inaugurated a distinguished human rights lecture series. In 2001, UConn established a human rights minor. It quickly became one of the most popular interdisciplinary academic programs, drawing students from across the campus. In 2003, the university awarded the first Thomas J. Dodd Prize in International Justice and Human Rights. Also in 2003, the university appointed the first Gladstein Chair of Human Rights and founded the Human Rights Institute, or HRI. HRI has served as the intellectual hub of UConn's human rights programs. The Gladstein Committee, our most engaged human rights faculty, has over 40 members, each appointed with departments in the humanities, social sciences, education, social work, law, and more. In 2012, HRI created an innovative undergraduate major in human rights, the first human rights major at a public university in the United States. Human rights is one of the fastest growing academic programs at UConn and now boasts nearly 200 students. 25 years later, we're looking ahead to the next generation of human rights at the University of Connecticut. The dynamic human rights programs that have grown at UConn since the dedication of the Dodd Center offer an unprecedented opportunity to facilitate real human rights change in our communities and around the world. Toward this end, we're dedicating the Dodd Center for Human Rights to extend the combined human rights legacies of Thomas J. Dodd and Christopher J. Dodd, Connecticut's father and son senators, and recognize the support and dedication of the entire Dodd family to human rights at UConn.
It's an appropriate time, I think, to recognize what has been accomplished in the first 25 years, and then setting some ambitions for the next 25 and beyond.
With the dedication of the Dodd Center for Human Rights, we're looking forward to the next generation of human rights at UConn. Not only do we recognize 2 generations of service in Thomas and Christopher J. Dodd, but we're also training the next generation of human rights advocates.
We now have cutting-edge leading work in outreach and in engagement, including really critical programs in human rights education, democracy and dialogue, and thinking through how we can use digital media and filmmaking to shape understandings of human rights and to help highlight the values that we all aspire to hold.
The need for us all to be aware of human rights and doing something about it and learning to live together and share this great country together is essential.
The next generation of human rights leaders are here today at UConn. We see it as our mission to change society, and we think that the Human Rights Institute positions us amazingly to do that.
We have a remarkable group of students. They're very, very socially conscious. They want to make the world a better place. They care about social justice. They care about human rights.
The human rights education I've received here has definitely made me a more dedicated activist, because it's shown me how in history people have practically created change, and how I can emulate that in anything that I organize or contribute to on campus.
We are so proud that this university now is the only public university in the country with a human rights program like we have. And so for us, the dedication is really a celebration of UConn and all the students at the school.
Each person can make a difference. I believe that very deeply. I don't think we have enough appreciation of how much of a difference one individual can make in the lives of others. And so if they walk away from this experience at UConn, having been involved to one degree or another in the human rights program here, I'd like to have them also embrace the notion and the idea that they are equipped to make a difference in people's lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Helena Falks.
Hello, everyone. I know that for all of you here in Connecticut, there is no introduction needed for our next speaker, but this event would not be the same without her being here. Chairwoman Rosa Deloro has served the people of Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District with dedication and commitment that is unequaled since her first election in 1990. I was fortunate enough to meet Rosa during her first stint on Capitol Hill when she served as Chief of Staff to my uncle. She was as much a powerhouse then as she is now. She's well known not only in her district, but across the state for her tenacious advocacy and her unwavering fight for meaningful public policies that benefit working families and make opportunity real. Among those efforts, Rosa is championing her issues like expanded childcare and paid and family and medical leave, building on the legacy of my uncle while creating her own. She, like my own family, learned the art of politics from her family at the kitchen table, and she's taken those lessons with her to Washington. Rosa has not only served as a tremendous representative for her district, but she has served in various capacities of leadership within the House Democratic Caucus, earning the respect and trust of her colleagues. Today, she serves as the chair of the House Appropriations Committee and is arguably one of the most powerful members of the U.S. House of Representatives. This is true, and yet to us, and to anyone who tries to use formal titles, she's Rosa. Rosa, we are so proud of you and thrilled to have you with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairwoman Rosa Deloro.
Good afternoon. I listened to Helena, and it's a wonderful, wonderful swell of memories that just crossed my mind of the wonderful years that I've had the opportunity to be with the Dodd family. Not only working for Chris Dodd, but getting to know his family, each and every one of them, and how remarkable they are. And so I say to you, Helena, thank you so, so much for your kind words, for your generous introduction, and how wonderful it is to join you, particularly on an occasion where we are celebrating your uncle, but we celebrate the entire Dodd family, all of you, who are quite remarkable. And I might add, with regard to Helena, we're all thrilled to hear that you are building on your family's legacy of public service with a recent announcement to run for governor of Rhode Island. Yes, yes. Now, we're all thrilled for you, and your dad, I'm sure, is very, very proud, but your mom would have been over the moon. If anyone knew Martha, over the moon. So. Welcome. I want to also acknowledge my House and Senate colleagues. It's always great to be a part of such a thoughtful and wonderful delegation who care deeply about the roles that they serve in and what they mean for the people that we all serve. And it's really pretty extraordinary. And I look at Jackie and I look at Christina, and my heart swells. And we miss Grace today, but she's becoming my constituent. She is at Yale University, so in New Haven, so wonderful to be with you. Let me, allow me to say a thank you to President Biden for joining us today. After years where the United States was often too disruptive or absent on a world stage. It is great to be working with you and with your administration, helping to send that clear message that America is back. The President also sends a message by being here today. He honors the values and the remarkable history and the work of the Dodd family in making this a better nation. He is poised in the coming weeks to transform this nation in the fashion of Franklin Roosevelt. And yet, he is here putting the spotlight on our nation's enduring obligations made concrete at this university. And it is great to be here at the University of Connecticut to celebrate your commitment over the past quarter century, working with the Dodd family and honoring Senator Thomas J. Dodd and Senator Christopher J. Dodd in a way that continues to promote and protect human rights and democratic values. Since 1995, when the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center was first dedicated by President Clinton and Senator Dodd on the 50th anniversary of the start of the Nuremberg trials, it has grown into one of the leading academic centers in the country. And at the heart of the program is the Human Rights Institute, which harnesses the power of education to influence and to mold young minds with a singular focus to build a global community of awareness and of advocacy. And through an innovative set of programs led by Senator Dodd, this center seeks to bring human rights and democracy to the forefront of our national conscience. And I'm so proud to join you in that effort, to recognize the important contributions and human rights legacy of two of the giants of the United States Senate. And there is a third giant of the United States Senate here with us today, in the President. And nearly 76 years ago, Chris's father, Thomas J. Dodd, addressed for the first time the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. At those historic trials, he helped to establish the principle of the rule of law by bringing war criminals to justice. Criminals whose crimes were so appalling that Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson, the chief prosecutor at the trial, described as, and I quote, crimes that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated. For Thomas Dodd's role in the Nuremberg trials, he was awarded the U.S. Medal of Freedom. He was also a staunch supporter of the new nation of Israel throughout his years in the House and in the Senate. He famously called out the State Department for inadequately responding to Soviet anti-Semitism, calling out the persecution of Soviet Jews. And in 1946, reflecting on his work during the trials, Tom Dodd wrote in a letter to his wife, Grace, that, and I quote, "There is a great satisfaction doing one's job, particularly a job like this. Someday it will be recognized as a great landmark in the struggle of mankind for peace." Well, that day is today. And after all these years since the Nuremberg trials, the work protecting human rights continues. We are all concerned by the threats posed by China and Russia. We are troubled by the democratic backsliding in Brazil, in Hungary, Poland, and Turkey, and perhaps even here at home. We are troubled by the 82 million people, 35 million children who are displaced by persecution and conflict, and the genocide against the Rohingya and the Uyghurs. This is unacceptable, and it must end. And it was Senator Chris Dodd was right when he said, and I quote, "The lessons of Nuremberg must be continually learned." So today, through this center, we renew our commitment to the universal values of human rights. We rededicate ourselves to building a better and a more just democracy here and globally. And I am honored to stand alongside Senator Dodd and President Biden, and they worked together for years in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and all of you who are gathered here today as we continue working towards making the Dodd Center the world's preeminent human rights program. For far too long, the myriad of human rights issues that the Dodd Center has focused its attention on, boasting one of the largest human rights majors in the country, and whose members have been on the front lines making a real difference in this field, has been neglected. Well, not anymore, not in the Biden administration, and not here at the University of Connecticut. The Dodd Center has done extraordinary things since it was first dedicated, like empowering human rights advocates and leaders, partnering with extraordinary faculty and researchers, amplifying the work of global human rights advocates through the Dodd Prize, and shining a light on the past and paving the way for a brighter future grounded in human rights and civic responsibility. Chris Dodd has helped build one of the most dynamic places dedicated to human rights teaching, to research and engagement. This rededication rightfully honors the human rights legacy of both Thomas J. Dodd, whose career took him from working as a prosecutor at the Nuremberg war trials to the halls of the United States Senate, as well as pays proper tribute to our state's longest-serving senator and my mentor, Senator Christopher Dodd. And prior to his long service in the Congress, Chris Dodd served in the Peace Corps for 2 years, working in the Dominican Republic, in Monsión, and if you listen to him, he characterizes that as the most worthwhile experience of his life, of building homes and building a church in Monsión. And he was there before being elected to the House of Representatives. And for the next 30 years, he occupied the same desk as his father did in the U.S. Senate. And he built on his father's legacy by taking on the issues his fathers did, such as being a leading voice for children and families. And both served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and of course, both championed human rights. And like his father before him, Chris supported ratifying a treaty establishing penalties for genocide. And in 1986, Chris was able to see firsthand something his father had helped start when the Senate finally approved that treaty. I have known Chris Dodd for more than 40 years. First as his campaign manager, then as his chief of staff, and finally as a colleague. Chris brings such a passion to the battles he has taken on, and that's something I've learned from him and so many others learned from him. He leaves a singular legacy in the U.S. Senate. He changed so many of our lives for the better. He had the courage to speak out as a freshman senator against the wars in El Salvador and Nicaragua, calling the administration's policy, and I quote, a formula for failure. I witnessed those events. And years later, he took on the Bush administration's war in Iraq, where he declared it erodes our nation's security and its moral leadership. And like his father, Chris too has been prescient and brave on human rights and justice around the world. It is why the Dodd Center has such a broad reach, empowering and inspiring the next generation to be the change that we need in the world today. And with that, please join me in welcoming Senator Christopher J. Dodd. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very, very much for that welcome. And Rosa, I can't even begin to thank you for your words today, but also for, I was going to stay away from the 42 years to hide a little bit behind that number. But I made a lot of political decisions, as those of us in public life do all the time. I don't know if I ever made a better one than the day I asked Rosa Deloro, after a 3-hour conversation, if she'd manage my first race for the United States Senate. And so I thank you, Rosa, for countless things over the years. But I come from a large family, and if we had one more member to add to that family, the name would be Rosa Deloro. So thank you, dear friend, for everything you do every single day. It's wonderful. Very, very grateful to you. Well, it's great to be back on the campus here, and let me briefly, if I may, thank so many people who have made this day possible, going back a long time. As some of you know, it was almost 30 years ago that a former president of this institution, John Gladstein, made a phone call to me and asked if I would be willing to think about placing my father's papers from Nuremberg and elsewhere here at the university. That's where this journey began that many years ago. And over the years, one president after another, boards of trustees have been incredibly supportive of those efforts over the year. And I must begin, of course, with the present president, President Andy Aguinobi. Done a great job under difficult circumstances. Dan Toscano, tremendous what you've done as well, along with the board. So grateful to all of them for their help in making this happen. We have a great governor in Connecticut, Ned Lamont. We've been through a tough time, as the country has, but Ned Lamont deserves great credit for all you've done for the country. So thank you, Governor, very, very much for all your help on this as well. I want to also remiss, if I'm not going to get down all of them because that would take the next 20 minutes, but I want to thank my family who are here, but particularly my wife, Jackie, and my daughter, Christina, who are here today as well. And I'll mention my niece, Helena Falks, who is the chairing of our advisory board, of which we have any number of members here today as well who served on that. But I'm very grateful to them, obviously, over the years for their tremendous support as well, for what they've contributed along the way. I've had a wonderful board helping us out over the last year or so. I mentioned the governor, his help, and others. But Alan Lazowski and Richard Friedman, two great friends, have been a tremendous help. I'm deeply grateful to them for their work and their help in putting this together. And of course, what an honor it's been to have Rabbi Lazowski and his lovely wife, Ruth, invoke the invocation here today for all of us. I wanted this to happen, many reasons. Rabbi, you're an inspiration in so many ways. You and your lovely wife were survivors of that Holocaust, which was the genesis of my father's coming alive, if you will, at the Nuremberg trials. And so it would have been not quite the same event had you not been here to start this ceremony off, because so much of what you and the other survivors have done over the years have made the issue of human rights come directly home to all of us. Thank you for your contributions to our state on countless occasions, and thank you for reminding all of us to never, ever forget. So thank you, my dear friend Rabbi, for being here and being a part of this day as well. On any journey in life, you meet wonderful people, and there are an awful lot of them gathered here as I look around who are gathered here today. But one of the people that I knew about, I'd heard his name, but didn't get to actually spend time with him until we decided to have lunch with each other about 1.5 years ago. And so Gary Gladstein and Phyllis, thank you both. Everything you've done for UConn already, a UConn grad, giving back to this university, the great Human Rights Institute, which is, of course, something that all of us are so deeply proud of, would never have happened without you. And so thank you immensely, my friend, for your loyalty to this university, your generosity to this university, and your commitment to human rights. It means a great deal. Thank you very much, Gary, for all of that as well. You know, I've always said in politics, the people that you mention in an event like this never remember that you've mentioned them. The people that you forget never forget that you've left them out as well. So it's a very dangerous process to go through. But I know gathered here with us today, I've met, in fact, saw them coming through the door, are my former colleagues and members of our Connecticut delegation in Congress. And I see Dick Blumenthal over on the side. I saw Chris Murphy coming in. I saw Johanna Hayes, John Larson, of course, you've heard from Rosa, Jim Himes as well, and right in the congressional district of Joe Courtney. I think I got them all. If I left someone out, tell me. But I thank you all for being here and being a part of this day, and our legislative leaders in the General Assembly and the members, rank and file members are here as part of that as well. And I know there are a lot of you here in this room. There have been some 200 or 300 people that I call part of my family in a way over the last, or during the 36 years that I served in public office representing the state, first as a congressman and then as a senator, as Rosa mentioned. And I've been blessed by having remarkable people who are a part of those efforts over all those long years. They call themselves the Dodd Squad coming along. A creative name, I might add. I don't know where they got that title from. But I'm grateful to them so much for everything they did to make our work successful. And there are no words I can ever use to thank the people of this state for giving both my father and I the honor to represent Connecticut in the halls of Congress. Together it was 52 years, his service and mine, to represent the state in that building. And so I'm very grateful to my staff. And I'd be remiss if I didn't at this particular moment. I remember I hired a guy out of a friendly ice cream shop almost more than 40 years ago to come and be a part of the staff. And if just a couple of days ago, after a long illness, Eddie Mann, my chief of staff of the Senate office, passed away. And so I want Eddie to know, even though he's not here today, how much he's responsible for everything else that happened over the years to make us successful on behalf of the people of this state. So to my staff, I thank all of them as well, the Dodd Squad. The Dan Wiener, I should have mentioned at the top. Glenn Matoma, who's been the director of the Dodd Impact Program. Glenn, thank you for everything you've done as well. And Kathy. And Kathy Leibel at the director of HRI, the Human Rights Institute. Again, it's a great team you put together making this happen. Richard Wilson, who is the Gladstein, holds the Gladstein chair, is also tremendously important. And Richard, thank you for all that you do as well in this. And lastly, events like this don't happen miraculously. You have people who dedicate themselves working with the university, the governor's office, the board of trustees. But I want Lee Reynolds, who's done a tremendous job for over a year pulling this all together. And Erin Bingle, Erin Bingle as well, working with us. Erin and I have only known her a short time, but she is phenomenal, the job she's done as well. So Erin, thank you for everything you've done to pull this all together for us. Well, let me just, in my sort of brief remarks here, because this is a great honor to have the President of the United States on our campus here and in our state. 75 years ago, on October 15th, 1946, that's tomorrow, 21 defendants at the Nuremberg trial were waiting in their cells 75 years ago today on the eve of receiving the sentences that the four Allied nations, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, had concluded only 2 weeks earlier on October 1st. Winston Churchill had argued for summary executions of all the defendants at Nuremberg. Joseph Stalin suggested a show trial for a day or two or a week or two, and then execute all of the defendants at Nuremberg. 10 of the defendants on October 16th, 1946, senior Nazi leaders, would be executed the next day on October 16th. 8 of the defendants were given a wide range of prison sentences, and 3 of the defendants were completely acquitted on that day. Who would have ever imagined, if you will, that a trial conducted by 4 nations with highly diverse judicial systems could adhere to the principles of the rule of law as they prosecuted some of the worst, most vile, horrific criminals in recorded history? 1 year earlier, in November of 1945, the chief prosecutor for the United States, Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson, eloquently foretold why the trials at Nuremberg were so critical. His words, uttered 3/4 of a century ago, predicted the conduct of the trial and, importantly, the relevancy of Nuremberg in our 21st century world. My father revered Justice Jackson, almost a father and son sort of relationship, and he often quoted a sentence from Justice Jackson's opening remarks at the trial. Let me share them with you. That 4 great nations, he said, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance by voluntarily submitting their captive enemies to the judgment of the rule of law, is one of the most significant tributes that power ever paid to reason. One sentence which captured the essence of Nuremberg, the rule of law. This wasn't about colonies and acquiring property. It was about restoring the rule of law that had been so violated. Everything the Nazis did during their reign was, in their minds, justified, ironically, because of the Nuremberg laws that gave them permission in their minds to do what they did. Prior to his death in April of 1945, Franklin Roosevelt, as many of you know, appointed Justice Jackson as the United States prosecutor at Nuremberg. And President Truman, shortly thereafter, of course, confirmed that choice. What FDR, Harry Truman, and Justice Jackson understood, and what my father, as a 38-year-old Justice Department prosecutor, would come to understand, and what President Joe Biden has believed and championed for his entire public life, is the peace and security we all seek at home and abroad, is rooted in the triumph of democratic values and the rule of law. The confirmation of my father's conviction that the Nuremberg trials were of meaningful importance was expressed in a letter to my mother in the early summer of 1946, almost a year later after the trials began. The letter captures why Nuremberg resonates even today, in my view, with all who value the rule of law. And further, that letter explains the huge impact that Nuremberg had on my father and his deep commitment to human rights and the rule of law throughout his public life. Let me quote from that letter to my mother in June of 1946. "Someday," he wrote, "the Nuremberg trials will be recognized as a great landmark in the struggle of mankind for peace. I will never do anything as worthwhile again. Nothing will ever really be as important. Someday the children, I hope, will point to it and be proud and inspired by it. Perhaps they will be at the bar themselves, and perhaps they will invoke the precedents and call upon the law that we make here at Nuremberg." Today we gather on the campus of a great American university and at the entrance to its Center for Human Rights. May I say with thanks and confidence to those of you gathered here today who made this day possible, including, of course, my friend, the President of the United States. In response to my father's hope that he uttered 75 years ago, here at this center, at this university, in this our country, we will invoke the precedents and call upon the law that was made in Nuremberg 75 years ago. I am very grateful to my dear, dear friend, our president, for coming to Connecticut, for coming to our flagship university, and for coming to the Dodd Center for Human Rights. My friendship with Joe Biden goes back years as Senate colleagues, and it strongly continues to this day. A friendship that is both personally and substantively grounded. When my sister passed away some years ago in Rhode Island, who came to Rhode Island and walked unannounced into that funeral home? It was then the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden. When my older brother was diagnosed with cancer, who did I call first for advice and counsel on what to do? My friend, Joe Biden. And we were both campaigning for the presidential nomination, which you've all certainly forgotten, in 2007. Participating in those endless debates. Which candidate flew to and from the debate with me? My friend, Joe Biden. Now, allow me to quickly add, we did so because of our deep friendship for each other, but we were also both broke, I might add, as well. In today's highly polarized political world, such joint ventures, regrettably, would be unlikely. So I'm grateful to my friend for being with us today. But there are strong substantive reasons as well for our friendship. In all our years together, I know of no other Senate colleague with whom I served who cared more or fought harder for the fundamental human rights of people at home and around the globe. Before his public life, President Biden was personally engaged with the Civil Rights Movement in Wilmington, Delaware. He authored the Violence Against Women Act, and he was a leading voice against apartheid in South Africa. And his historic confrontation with the Balkans during the Balkans conflict, with the leading Serbian human rights abuser, Slobodan Milosevic, was yet another example of his fearless advocacy of human rights. The President was a consistent, strong voice on human rights conditions in Northern Ireland as well, and I never had a more loyal colleague in my efforts to stem the tide of human rights abuses in Central America. As Senator, as Vice President, and today as our President, Joe Biden is not merely an advocate of human rights and the rule of law. He is consistently and actively engaged as an outspoken world leader in this cause. Today, hate crimes and hate speech, as we all know, are on the rise. Supremacist groups are proliferating at home and around the globe as well. And the number of autocratic regimes seems to grow on a regular basis. Mr. President, your presence here today on this our university campus, at this Center for Human Rights, is not merely a gesture of friendship, as much as I appreciate our friendship. It is also a reflection of who you are, of what you believe, and what you want for our country. Your courageous decisions, your clear priorities, in my view, and your deep, long-held convictions to build America back better after these hard and difficult years is exactly the leadership that our country so desperately needs. My friends gathered here today on this campus, would you please join me in welcoming and thanking our President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Thank you so very much. My name is Joe Biden. I am Jill Biden's husband. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. Thank you. It is truly, it's not hyperbole to suggest, it's a great honor to be here, a genuine honor. And at this great public university, celebrating the life and legacy of not one, but two proud sons of Connecticut, Senator Thomas Dodd and my good friend, and we truly are really good, close friends, Senator Chris Dodd. Chris and I have known each other for a long time, but if you'll excuse the point of personal privilege, as we used to say in the Senate, I saw up close how he fought for human rights and human dignity in the Senate. Do you know my measure, Madam Ambassador, Ambassador Kennedy? You know what my measure is? People who tell me they care about people and then disrespect a waitress or a waiter. People who tell me they care about how, in fact, people are entitled to be treated with dignity and walk by someone at a shoe sign stand and suddenly say hello. People who do not do the just simply decent things for ordinary people. That's the real measure. I've never seen Chris, figuratively or speaking, walk by anybody. I've never seen him, nor his wife, nor his two brilliant, beautiful daughters. I remember the passion and eloquence that you brought to the floor, Chris, whether you were fighting for American families or serving as the Senate leading voice on engagement with Latin America and the Caribbean. And your brother, the ambassador, did a pretty damn good job as well. I think that the work this center is doing to bring human rights to the forefront of public understanding is making a real and immediate impact for all young people today. Well, you know, I think it's going to rate high among your family's many great and lasting contributions to the country, Chris. And I know this is truly a family commitment for the Dodds. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I think I really mean it. It's an honor to be able to be here. Of course, I owe Chris. I remember as he pointed out, we were both running for president back in 2007 with almost no cash in either of our campaigns. You let me hop a ride with you in a twin-engine prop plane, true story, from our Senate vote in D.C. to a Democratic debate in New Hampshire. We were on our way to the debate one other time, but the whole way up, we just laughed and told stories before we were debating one another. And then the next day, to get back to the Senate to vote, we had to flag down a young, remember this? Flag down a young senator named Barack Obama to get to even open the airport. God's truth. Remember that, Chris? Here, he's just been there 2 years. He was on my Foreign Relations Committee. I was chairman. I said, can you get the airport open for us? I used to kid Barack. I couldn't understand why he so soundly defeated me in that primary. And then I realized when he'd be introduced by the voice of God. I get introduced by Johnny Scanafrana. So it took a while for me to figure all this out. Luckily, Chris, I got to travel in a much nicer plane these days. And It's yours to travel in anytime you would like. I want to thank a few more proud Connecticut leaders who've been spending time with me today. Governor Lamont, you're one of the finest governors in the country. I'm not being solicitous. That's a fact. Exceeded only by your wife. And Senator Blumenthal, I mentioned earlier today, I apologize for repeating this, but my son, Beau Biden, who's the one that should be standing here talking to you, my son, Beau Biden, was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. And one of the people he went to and sought advice from, for real, was then Attorney General Blumenthal. They became friends, and my son was a great admirer, and I think the senator knows that. And Senator Murphy, if I have to summon in the foxhole with me, I want Murph with me, man. No, I'm serious. This guy knows as much about foreign policy as anybody does, and his failure to remain silent has meant a great deal to me because he's spoken up on so much. And Representative Courtney, I thank you for your help and your support. And Rosa Deloro. Rosa, I don't owe as much as Chris does to Rosa, but I owe a hell of a lot to her. My son was married, and he was in the second year of law school, and he transferred to Yale Law School. And Rosa heard that I was coming up with him, and the apartment he rented was less than ideal. And the whole thing had to be painted. My brother Jimmy fixes everything. My brother Jimmy's with us, and we went down and bought about 28 gallons of paint. I don't know, but for real, it was hot as hell as well. And I'm up on a 8-foot ladder painting the crown molding and sweating like the proverbial you know what. And here at the door, I said, "Come in." And the then, is it alderman or councilman at the time? Alderman Deloro walked in, her mom. And she said, "Where's Biden?" I said, "I'm here." She said, "No, stop fooling with me, son. Where's Biden?" I said, No, I'm Biden. I'm Biden. And she came over and said, "I just want to come over and introduce myself and tell your son will be taken care of." And in walks the chief of police. I thought, holy God, what did I do? She said, "You have nothing to worry about. You have nothing to worry about." Talk about constituent service. Rosa, you come by it, honestly. And Rosa, we've all, and I'm not being solicitous again, using that word twice now, we've all learned a great deal from you. I want to thank you for your long-standing dedication related to the well-being of children and families, and for championing and expanding the child tax credit, which is a gigantic middle-class tax cut for working families that finally got passed in the American Rescue Plan, which we were able to get done immediately upon being elected. And Rosa will not tell you, but she's the first person I called to ask for her help as to how I should do this. And that put money in the pockets of families all across this country, even as we speak. It's how we're going to cut child poverty in this country. And we've already cut it nearly in half. And none of us should lose sight of what it meant to American families when we think about our mission to defend human rights and dignity at home and around the world. 26 years ago today, another United States Senator, United States President, who I just spoke to, Chris, literally an hour and a half ago, Bill Clinton, he sends his best, by the way, visited this university to dedicate the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center, a library and archives of papers that amount to an incredible first-person, first draft of history. And let me say, they're all thinking about President Clinton today, as sending him his good wishes to speedy recovery. He's always been the comeback kid. He's getting out of the hospital. Everything's going well. But he wanted to send his best. As a young lawyer, Tom Dodd had already built a record of fighting hatred by prosecuting the KKK in the South. But when in 1945 he left behind his beloved Grace and his 5 young children, a young Christopher, just 14 months old at the time, to travel to the bombed-out cities of Europe to document the shocking atrocities still fresh in their horror, to question and cross-examine some of history's most notorious villains. That's not hyperbole. Some of history's most notorious villains. And to expose beyond question the depravity and the crimes against humanity that the Nazi regime committed. Tom Dodd dedicated his intellect and his moral passion and his resolute sense of right and wrong to making the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal a testament to justice. And that's what it was, a testament to justice. Nothing like it ever happened before. And all the while, he was writing letters to his grace, lamenting their separation, but recognizing the momentous weight of history that rested on his shoulders. And Chris, I came up with the same sentence from your book. Someday, he wrote, will be recognized as a great landmark in the struggle of mankind for peace. Never before has such a record been written, and men will read it for 1,000 years in amazement and wonder how it ever happened. When President Clinton spoke at this first dedication, he ended on a poignant reminder. He said, and I quote, "The road to tyranny, we must never forget, begins with the destruction of truth." The road to tyranny begins with the destruction of truth. In my view, that was the lesson at the heart of the Nuremberg trials. Finding truth, documenting it, so it could never be denied. In court, Tom Dodd built a case fact by fact, using the Nazis' own meticulous records of crimes and shocking human evidence to pin down Nazi leaders who tried to deny their complicity and feign ignorance. And even more important, it denied the entire German policy the ability to feign ignorance. To deal with the past, you must face the truth. Whether it's Dachau, or Buchenwald, Auschwitz, or other camps, millions of Jews rounded up, along with members of other minority groups, thrown into camps, abused, used as forced labor, medical experimentation. 6 million Jews murdered, including so many who met their ultimate fate in the gas chamber. He made sure no one could deny their own eyes and what they saw. He preserved the truth, ugly and as traumatic as it was for all of history, so that the horrors of the Holocaust could never be diminished or denied. And the evil that we still have to guard against to this day has to be watched. Chris, as you heard me say many times before, because you got to meet my dad. My dad was a well-read, high school educated fellow whose greatest regret was he never went to college. But he cared deeply about human dignity. Our dinner table, my dad was what many would call a righteous Christian. He happened to be a Catholic, but he's a righteous Christian. And growing up, my dad would come home for dinner before we went back to close the business he managed. And the dinner table was a place we sat down to have conversation and incidentally eat. I'm serious. My dad used to talk about, as a student of the Holocaust, what a tragedy it was that we didn't bomb the railroad tracks toward the end of the war. How wrong it was that we turned away the St. Louis, a ship full of Jewish refugees from Europe. He believed passionately the only way we could make real the promise of never again was to keep reminding ourselves of what had happened. and how so many people otherwise thought themselves decent people rationalized that it really wasn't happening. We didn't know what was going on. Because they weren't turning on the gas valve, they had no responsibility. That's why, if you'll again excuse a point of personal privilege, when each of my children, and now my grandchildren, turn the age of 15, the first thing I've done, my word is abiding, is put them on an aircraft and fly to Dachau, one at a time, at age 15. Work sets you free as you go through the entrance. But that's not what I wanted them to see. I wanted them to see the lovely homes that were right up against the fence line with their beautiful roofs. People living in there rationalized that it's not me. I'm not doing this. And I don't know really what's going on in there. I wanted them to see the ability of the human mind to rationalize cannot be underestimated. I would say parenthetically, the reason why Germany has been able to turn it around unlike other countries is because they faced it head on, acknowledged. So let me say it again. Nuremberg was unlike anything that ever came before. It was not about vengeance. It was about accountability. For only acknowledging the truth can we prevent the repetition of atrocities which are happening now in other parts of the world. It elevated our conception, as Chris said, of the rule of law. It set a marker for the future of justice, uplifted the importance of human rights in international affairs. We see it in the Nuremberg tribunals, the blueprint we see in those tribunals, the blueprint for future United Nations tribunals that would help deliver justice after atrocities committed in Rwanda, in the former Yugoslavia. We see it in the values championed at Nuremberg and the antecedents of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the foundation of a rules-based international order built out of the wreckage of 2 wars, world wars, not just to prevent us from destroying ourselves, but to actively build a better future. We see in the passion of a young prosecutor a commitment to prioritizing the human impacts of policies. The commitment carried through in his son's career of public service by all the students of this institute who've been inspired by the example. We need you. We need you badly. And as we look around the world today, we see human rights and democratic principles increasingly under assault. We feel the same charge of history upon our own shoulders to act. We have fewer democracies in the world today than we did 15 years ago. Fewer, not more, fewer. Cannot be sustained. That's why from day one of my administration, I've taken concrete steps to put human rights back at the center of our foreign policy and reassert our moral leadership on the global stage. To lead, as Chris has so often heard me say, with the power of our example, not the example of our power. Chris and I served in the Foreign Relations Committee. We excoriated the abuses elsewhere in the world and called for action overseas. But human rights, in some ways, stood apart from the domestic struggle of civil rights and civil liberties and equal justice here at home. Today, we know that our efforts to defend human rights around the world are stronger because we recognize our own historic challenges as part of that same fight. Leading by example means taking action at home to renew and defend our own democracy, to advance equity and promote justice, to defend the sacred right to vote in free, fair, and secure elections. Leading by example means not pretending that our history has been perfect, but demonstrating how strong nations speak honestly about the past and uphold the truth and strive to improve. We make the best case for gender equality, racial justice and equity, religious freedom, the rights of the LGBTQ+ peoples, and other marginalized communities around the world by practicing what we preach. First 10 minutes I was in office, I ended the Muslim ban, advancing racial equity through the federal government, overturning the ban on transgender individuals serving openly in the United States military, establishing the White House Gender Policy Council, demonstrating that our commitment to human rights begins at home, is among the most powerful and persuasive tools in our foreign policy kit. And as we defend human rights beyond our shores, we're more effective when we work together, allies and partners in our shared values. America as a nation is unique in all history, not because we're inherently better, because the basis upon which we're organized. Virtually every other nation is organized based on ethnicity, religion, geography, color. We're unique in all the world. We're based on one guiding principle. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have never lived up to it. We've never, until very recently, walked away from it. The arc has always bent closer and closer to justice and inclusion. The moment we stop, the moment we rest, is the moment that our influence diminishes. So we're re-engaging multilaterally and rallying the world to advance universal human rights and fundamental freedoms, to prove that democracies can still deliver in an age of fast-moving, cross-cutting challenges. We have rejoined the UN Human Rights Council, which we walked away from. The United States of America didn't want to be part. I mean, just yesterday, we won an election to a new 3-year term that begins in January in that committee. We had to fight to get back on it because the world wondered, do we mean it still? The United States of America, do we mean it? In December, the United States will host a virtual summit, a summit of democracies, to bring together world leaders to make concrete commitments to defend democratic values and push back against advancing authoritarianism. Not war, but important words. We can't return to a world where might is right and strong nations abuse weak or oppress individual rights with impunity. Nuremberg, forced us to look closely at the evil of humankind and what we're capable of perpetrating. To see mass atrocities, crimes against humanity, do not happen by accident. They don't happen by accident. The result of choices made by individual human beings and world leaders. And sadly, when we look around the world today, we cannot say that the specter of atrocity is behind us. We see today the patterns, the choices playing out around the world, even as we speak. The oppression and use of forced labor of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Treatment of the Rohingya by the military junta in Burma. The rampant abuses, including the use of starvation and sexual violence to terrorize civilian populations in northern Ethiopia. Whenever we hear that kind of poisonous hatred, wherever we see our fellow human beings being dehumanized, doesn't mean we go to war, but we must speak out. Silence, as my dad would remind me, silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. That's what Nuremberg said. Your silence is complicity. I've raised these issues personally with leaders around the world, our friends and adversaries alike, and I made it clear that no U.S. president should stand by when human rights are under attack and maintain their legitimacy. That's who we are as Americans. It's part of our DNA. We've fought, we've marched, we've sacrificed to ensure the rights are not reserved to just the wealthy or the powerful. They're God-given inheritance of every person on this planet by virtue of our shared humanity. As I said to a Supreme Court justice who I disagreed with in a hearing, we have a different form. You think I have my rights because the Constitution granted to me. I possess my rights because I was born. And I gave up some of my rights in the Constitution. That's the radical idea at the core of the founding of our nation. As I said, that all men and women are created equal. We really are endowed by a Creator with certain inalienable rights. And those rights don't flow from the power of the government. These rights exist for every individual, period. Period. And it's the job of government to protect them, to uphold them equally for all people. We've never, as I said, fully lived up to that animating American ideal, but we've never turned our backs on it. In all the years since our founding, that idea has been our nation's steady North Star, drawing us back on course. The constant struggle to live up to our highest democratic principles, to self-correct, has made us a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. It's also made us strong, resilient, innovative, dynamic. As I said, I repeat, I apologize, America is the only nation founded on an idea, the single most powerful idea in human history. It sparked our revolution. It helped ignite the wave of change around the world that successive generations have built on, expanding our understanding and extending protections to ever wider circle. We must never forget just how fragile the principle of universal human rights still is, how easily bruised, often sacrificed in human battles for power and personal enrichment. In an age of increasing misinformation and disinformation, we must not grow complacent in our defense of the democratic values that have been the firm foundation for an era of peace and prosperity unprecedented in human history. Attacks on truth are still the harbinger of tyranny. Nothing about our democracy is assured, as I'm sure you're all becoming to realize lately. Nothing about our freedom is guaranteed. We have to work for it. In those letters from Tom Dodd to his dear wife, Grace, reflecting his service at Nuremberg, he wrote, "Sometimes a man knows his duty so clearly, so surely, he cannot hesitate, and he dare not refuse it." Tom Dodd lived a life with a clarity of purpose. He brought it to his service as a U.S. Senator, leading the floor fights with the Kennedys on civil rights legislation in the 60s, advocating for gun safety in a state that was a major gun manufacturer, legislation that was ahead of its time, fighting always for human rights and democracy against the forces of oppression and injustice. He passed that passion on to his children and to his son, Chris. Chris carried forward his father's mantle in the United States Senate. He used it to fight for all American children and families, passing the first Child Care Act we've seen in this country since World War II, passing the Family and Medical Leave Act. Chris rallied against policies that militarized our relationships in Latin America and argued, instead, recognize and invest in the people in our hemisphere. He spoke out when he saw the legacy of justice that his father had fought for in Nuremberg being wrapped in the excesses of a war on terror. And he helped to create this center, growing it over the years from an archival repository for the truth into a leading center for the study and promotion of human rights at home and abroad, into a widely respected academic institution, training the next generation of human rights defenders and passing the torch to those of you who will carry the fight on into the future and for the truth. So as we rededicate the Dodd Center for Human Rights to honor the legacies of both father and son, let's also dedicate it to the future of generations, to the students here in the audience today who discover and defend human rights as the passion and purpose of our life. So let us be dedicated to expanding our shared understanding that we can never fully realize the freedom we wish for ourselves without also helping ensure that liberty and justice for everyone. And let's dedicate it to the unending fight to bring our own nation, our own world, closer to a future in which every human being is free to pursue the highest dreams and unleash their full potential. And for you students that are here, undergraduates at this great institution, there's no reason why you will not be doing what I'm doing as President of the United States, standing here, speaking to audiences from now. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I was taught, came from very modest means, no Horatio Alger story, but very modest means, that you can be anything you set your mind to if you work at it. So many of you in this audience, especially in the second tier there, are the people that my grandchildren are going to be looking to. There's not a single reason why, we can't do this. Not a single reason. As I've told every world leader that I've gotten to know, and I've met many, many of them, it's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.